Good afternoon, fourth grade. Today we're going to start chapter 5. So you need to open your book to page 61, and you need to have your notes page in front of you. Pick up your pencil and get ready to fill in the blanks for the summary of chapter 4. Remember, you can press pause at any moment to write down the answer and then play when you're ready to listen. I'm at the top of the notes where it says Tim. Tim is excited to learn that Sam has come home to visit. While Tim is chopping wood, several Continental soldiers ride up to the tavern. Tim sneaks into the kitchen and overhears the soldiers threatening his father. The soldiers want his father's gun. But Sam took it when he left to join the war. Afraid for his father's life, Tim runs to Tom Worup's to find Sam and get the gun. As he's taking the gun, Sam wakes up and chases Tim down the hill. This should say Tim. Tim almost shoots Sam with the gun. Tim tells Sam what's going on at the tavern, and Sam agrees to go with Tim. Once they discover that their father is okay, Sam runs away. So you can go back and re-listen to the warm-up if you did not catch all of the blanks. Now we're at our focus question. How do Sam's actions influence the father and Tim's relationship? What does this reveal about his character? So because of what Sam has done, stealing the gun and running away to join the war, Tim and his father are affected by that. How they interact and relate to each other is affected because of what Sam did. And it has a lot to do with that inner conflict that Tim is having right now about which side of the war he should be on. Before we get started reading and collect evidence, we want to look at our vocabulary words for today. The first word is modest. Okay, and that's when it's like the opposite of bragging. If you're modest and someone gives you a compliment, you say, thank you, I just try to do my best. Or thank you, I'm just trying to work hard, right? You don't say, yeah, I know I'm the best, woo woo. That would not be an example of modest. Okay, so this man, the Pope, is a modest person. He's a very powerful and important person, but we see him here washing people's feet. The second one is surveyor. That's a person who goes out and they draw these imaginary lines for, other people's land. So they're the ones who say like, oh, this is, where Washington, D.C. ends and Virginia begins. That's a surveyor. Great. So now we need to turn to page 64 through 67. And basically what's happened at the beginning of chapter 5 is that, Tim is reflecting on the war. And he's saying, when those soldiers came to my house, like, that was my first experience of the war. That's the closest we had gotten to war. And then he talks about how, on page 62, how these soldiers have been going into people's farms and killing their cows so that they can have food for their men. They're doing it without permission, so they're actually stealing the cows from different farms, and because of this, there is a food shortage. And Tim and his tavern have experienced this food shortage. So you'll want to put a star by pages 62 and 63 because that's going to be on your exit ticket. Okay, there's this food shortage, right? Because the soldiers are so hungry, they are stealing cows from the farmers in the area. And because of that, the prices of meat and wheat and flour have gone up. And now, Tim and his family are having to charge more money for the things that their tavern sells. And then Tim talks about, how much he misses Sam. Okay? And he talks about, how brave Sam is. And it's almost like, he says right here, so I guess that being a soldier probably didn't have much glory to it either, but it was mostly just a lot of hard work. But still, I envied Sam, and I wished I were old enough to do something glorious too. And so when we're thinking about who is Tim and what's he like, underline this quote, but still I envied Sam, and I wish I were old enough to do something glorious too. So that's the quote you want to write right here where it says quote from the text. Press pause to write down that quote. Press play when you're ready to put it in your own words. You could say, Tim is jealous of Sam because he gets to do something, glorious. He gets to do something brave, and Tim has to stay home and work in the tavern. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the setting. And so at the bottom of page 64, it tells us that time passed, both sides had victories, and Tim is still confused. Okay? So now I'm on page 65. Get ready for the setting on page 65. Remember, that's the time and the place. So it became spring. Underline this sentence. So it became spring. And one April morning in 1776, Mr. Heron came into the tavern with Tom Worrups. Underline that sentence. Write that sentence where it says quote from the text. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to put it in your own words. You could say, this chapter takes place on an April morning in 1776 at the tavern where Tim's family works. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you are ready for the problem. And this should say chapter 5, sorry. I am at the second paragraph on page 65. We are listening for the problem. There was a soft rain falling and a fire burning in the fireplace. Father was rushing a chair seat, and I was helping him. It all seemed warm and cozy, so no problem so far. Father stopped his work. Good morning, Mr. Heron, he said. Father was always polite to Mr. Heron. He'd been in Trinity College in Dublin, and he was a surveyor. So he's letting you know he's nice to him because he's an important person. He'd been elected to the General Assembly in Hartford, but he'd been pushed out of it by the Patriots for being a Tory. He was rich too, although nobody knew where he got his money from. He owned a black man and he had other servants besides. So remember, back in 1776, slavery was common in the United States. And so when it says that he owned a black man, he's saying he owned a slave. Let's keep going. We're listening for the problem. Good morning, Life, he said to Father. Father's name is Life, in case you haven't picked up on that yet. Good morning, Life, he said to Father. Then he noticed me. Good morning, Tim. Good morning, sir, I said. Life, you've got a smart boy here. Smart as Sam if he wanted to be. I hope he's going on with school. Father shrugged. I'd like him to, but I can't spare him from here every day. Mr. Heron may have wanted me to go on with my schooling, but I wasn't sure of it myself. I figured I was as smart as Sam, but I didn't have much interest in school as he had. I liked ciphering all right, but I didn't care much for spelling and studying the Bible and memorizing Psalms. "Oh, Sam's smarter than I am, sir," I said, just to be modest. "I like to see him in school when I can," Father said, "but I need him here a good deal. I can't run the tavern without him." "Still, it's a shame to waste talent. I could make a surveyor out of him if he'd apply himself. Perhaps I might take him on as an apprentice in a year or two, once he's learned to cipher." Being a surveyor was a good thing. You could make a lot of money. Father said that surveyors always knew about the good deals on land and could get rich speculating. So that part of it sounded good, but I wasn't sure about all that studying. "I don't know if I'm smart enough," I said, mostly to be modest again. "Certainly you are, Tim." He sat down at the long table. "Tim, how about getting me a pint of beer, and one for Tom, too?" Tom Worrups did spare work for Mr. Heron. Sometimes he ran messages for him, too. He didn't sit because he was only an Indian, but stood leaning against the wall. So this lets us know that Native Americans or Indians didn't have the same privileges as white men in 1776. Let's keep going. I got mugs down from the shelf and filled them and served them around, including one for Father. He sat down at the table too, and I went back to rushing the chair. "What do you hear from Sam?" Mr. Heron said. "Nothing," Father said. I knew he didn't want to talk about Sam, but he couldn't be rude to Mr. Heron. "He never writes?" "No." They weren't paying attention to me. I took a quick glance at Tom Worrups. He was standing there holding his mug of beer, his face blank. Couldn't figure out which side he was on. He lived on Mr. Reed's land, and Mr. Reed was a patriot, but he ran messages for Mr. Heron, and Mr. Heron was a Tory. "It's a shame, about Sam," Mr. Heron said. Father shrugged but didn't say anything. Mr. Heron must have known that Father didn't want to talk about Sam, but he said perhaps there'd be a way of finding out where he is. "If he wants to see us, he knows where we live." Mr. Heron nodded. Okay, so when we're thinking about Tim's problem, let's go back to page 66. And if we're looking over page 66, Mr. Heron talks about how smart Sam is, and he asks if he's going to school, and he says no. And Sam, even says hey, I would like to go to school, but I'm not sure if I'm smart enough, right? And so that's his problem. Tim cannot go to school because his father needs him at the tavern. Press pause to write down your answer, and then play when you're ready to find a quote. And so I'm looking right here at this quote in the middle of page 66. "I'd like to see him in school when I can," Father said, "but I need him here a good deal. I can't run the tavern without him." Silently write down that quote in the box for number 3. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to get started. And now we want to find the solution. And if we're looking, it says, Mr. Heron keeps talking, and he says, it's a shame to waste the talent. Maybe I can make him an apprentice in a year or two. And Tim says, being a surveyor is a good thing. So it seems like that's something he would like to do. So when we say the solution, we said Mr. Heron volunteered to make Tim an apprentice in a year or two. Silently write that sentence down in the solution. And then when you're looking for a quote, it's in the middle of page 66. "Still, it's a shame to waste talent. I could make a surveyor out of him if he'd apply himself. Perhaps might take him on as an apprentice in a year or two once he's learned to cipher." Silently write down that quote where it says quote from the text. And then We want you to write your paragraph. Go.